All right. I think we'll get started. We're at 12 noon on the dot. Um, so as you saw, my colleague Moji will be recording the session. It will be available after the webinar as well. My name is Christa Costas-Bradstreet, and I'd like to welcome you to today's session. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to do a land acknowledgement, and then I'm going to introduce my colleagues, and then we'll get going to the session. And Moji will share the slides so that you can follow us along. Oh, there she's sharing it now. Perfect. So as you know, we're going to be talking about activating your neighborhood, and we are together for an hour and 15 minutes today. It's a weird time, but we thought we would take the hour to present and then have some additional time to ask some questions. So first, I would like to acknowledge that I live and work in Burlington, Ontario, a place rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Haudenosaunee and the Métis, our lands spanning from Lake Ontario to the Niagara Escarpment are steeped in Indigenous history. The territory is mutually covered by the Dish with one spoon, Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy, the Ojibwe, and other allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lake. I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which I live is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. I'd also like to acknowledge that you are joining us today from many places near and far and acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. So as I mentioned, my name is Christa Costas-Bradstreet. I'm currently the Executive Director of the Active Living Alliance for Canadians with a Disability. When we began this project, however, I was working with the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association. I've been working in the physical activity promotion sector for 34 years, and I vow to retire soon. I'm joined today by three wonderful colleagues. Troy Glover is a professor in the Department of Recreation and Leisure Studies and director of the Healthy Communities Research Network at the University of Waterloo. His research examines how leisure in the public realm contributes to the social infrastructure of community life by facilitating and strengthening social connections and fostering conditions for greater community capacity. Troy also just started a new consulting business called Healthy Placemaking Solutions that specializes in municipal parks and recreation. Gord Tate is the active living coordinator for the municipality of Chester in Nova Scotia, and Gord's actually going to talk a little bit more about his role during his presentation. And I wanted to thank and acknowledge Moji Akonde, who's my longtime colleague from CPRA and also with the Active Living Alliance, and she's supporting our webinar today, and we'll do all of the technical stuff. So with that, I would like to turn everything over to Troy to kick us off to talk about activating your neighborhood. Thanks, Troy.
Thanks, Christa. Hello, everyone. Let's start off with a rhetorical question, I guess. What do you do to optimize your own health? I think this is something that we think about regularly, and certainly every New Year's. I suspect that many of you, when it comes to New Year's resolutions, you think a lot about your individual health and well-being, and consider things like getting more exercise, addressing your food intake, these sorts of things, reducing your stress. These are all important facets of our health and well-being. But today, I want to talk more specifically about your social health. And so, Moji, if you wouldn't mind just moving a couple of slides ahead. I'm sorry, I'm a little ahead of you. I want to draw your attention to this quote from this very good book that was published just a couple of years ago. And I would highly recommend that all of the attendees in this webinar check this book out. It's by Waldinger and Schultz, who are two Harvard professors who have overseen the longest study of adult development in the world. It's the Harvard Adult Development Study. It's been ongoing for over 85 years now. And in that study, Waldinger and Schultz are able to analyze data that they've collected from hundreds of individuals in the United States and track their health outcomes over time. And so I'm going to spoil the book a bit for you here and just offer you the actual advice that Waldinger and Schultz give readers in the book. And that is, and I'm going to quote them here, if you're going to make that one choice, that single decision that could best ensure your own health and happiness, science tells us that your choice should be to cultivate warm relationships of all kinds. And that's the key to much of what we're going to talk about today. And that is how we as a field can promote greater social connectedness within our communities. And today we've got some solutions as to how we might be able to do that. Moji, if you could uh, click to the next slide. This is a particular problem in Canada. Oh, sorry, the one before. Um, social connectedness is a problem in Canada. And in fact, in 2023 in the United States, they identified social isolation and loneliness as an epidemic. The numbers are not much different in Canada, and yet there isn't much attention drawn to this crisis. Here are a couple of figures that come from the 2023 National Vital Signs Report. In it, the Canadian community associations identified some fairly stark figures when it comes to people's connections and Canadians' connections with other Canadians. They indicated that 29% of Canadians do not have any close friends in their community. They also mentioned that 8% of Canadians have no close family, and that 12% of Canadians have no close friends whatsoever. Next slide, please. In fact, if we look to Statistics Canada, recently they reported that 34.5% of Canadians feel lonely sometimes, while 13.1% feel lonely always or often. Combined, that's almost half of Canadians. Now, when I present these statistics, many people look at the 13.1% and think, well, that's not a huge number. But when you think about a country that is over 41 million Canadians, we're talking about over 4.1 million Canadians who feel lonely always or often. And that is particularly disconcerting. Next slide, please. This is information that comes from the leading scholar in the area of social isolation and loneliness, Julianne Holt Lundstad. Her and her colleagues really have tried to draw attention to the issue of social isolation and loneliness and really underscore its negative impact on our health and well-being. And in doing so, her and her colleagues conducted a meta-analysis where they looked at the literature, the academic literature, and all of the empirical research that has focused on the health benefits and, I guess, negative health outcomes associated with social isolation and loneliness, and tried to distill all of that information into a meaningful way of underscoring the importance of social connection in our lives. And in doing so, they are often quoted as saying that a lack of social connection is actually worse for your health and well-being than smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day, drinking 6 alcoholic drinks daily, physical inactivity, obesity, and air pollution. And that's quite remarkable, because I think when we think about our individual health and well-being and the things that we need to do to enhance and optimize it, I think very rarely do we really focus specifically on the importance of connecting with our intimate partners, with close friends, with community members, coworkers, acquaintances, and even just the general public, people who live in our communities. Next slide, please. So I think this is an important question to understand how we can go about seeking that connection with others. So it's important to ask, from what sources do we seek connection? Next slide, please. In my work recently, I've been I guess, meeting regularly with a colleague here in Kitchener-Waterloo named Paul Cobflesh. Paul was the former chief marketing officer for BlackBerry back in its day. And he's turned his attention to city building and what we need to do to create lively and playful communities. In my discussions with him, he's introduced something that I think is quite profound. And what he's done is he's really looked at um, domains of our life and the role that they play in our lives in this contemporary moment. And so these domains would be familiar with everybody. I think we often talk about live, work, and play as domains in our everyday lives. I want to dissect each one of them to underscore the important role that our field plays in terms of connecting people. So let's start with the domain of live. In that regard, it's interesting because in the past, I think a lot of people have really looked to where they live as an important way of connecting with others. Interestingly, Paul has really uh, sensitized me to how that expectation of where we live contributing to our social connection, how that's really declined over time. And if you think about our contemporary moment, the affordability crisis that we're living through means that cities are struggling to offer an appealing definition of live to its future citizens. And what I mean by that is young people may have, whereas in the past they could depend on living in a community perhaps for a long time and building connections there. I think the transition from a place to live, temporary lodgings, that sort of thing, has really influenced that live domain's potential for connecting us to others. So that potential has declined significantly over time. Let's move to the domain of work. Work also has been a domain of life where we've often connected with others and developed important friendships or acquaintances. Interestingly, and I'm sure everybody on this call can appreciate that work has really changed over time. And that's been, I guess, advanced in particular after our experiences through the pandemic, where remote work has become more and more common. The challenge with remote work is that we are failing to build those sorts of connections that we might have otherwise built in our jobs when we were in person with our coworkers. And so remote work means that work as a domain has become less of a determining factor in how Canadians choose the city in which they live. Next slide, please. And so that brings us to the importance of play. Whereas play may have seemed more trivial in comparison to the domains of live and work, in this day and age, I think play now represents a strategic opportunity to shift to a societal agenda. It becomes the domain where we can build those meaningful connections that have withered in those other two domains that I referenced. Next slide. So, if we think about play being important to building connections, what can we learn from play theory? Next slide. Well, first of all, I'm going to cite a scholar named Sicart who wrote a book called Play Matters. And what I want to highlight from his work is that he underscored play as a mode of engagement. So rather than a specific activity, he identified it as being something contextual, appropriative, disruptive, and expressive. And the key concept that he underscored in his work is that communities really ought to encourage playful interactions. And this is going to be a major theme in the work that we're going to present today, is that we have a role in our field to encourage neighbors to engage in playful interactions. And we've got some strategies and tactics to share with you to consider for implementing in your communities. But ultimately, play should be woven into daily life, not just confined to playgrounds. Next slide, please. The other scholar I wanted to identify was Johann Huizinga, who is a very well-known play theorist who wrote a book called Play as the Foundation of Culture. And really the key concept that Huizinga identified in his works was something that he referred to as the magic circle. And that's this idea that play exists in a special, separate space, physical or conceptual, where different rules apply. So this could be examples like sports fields, theaters, and games. If you could advance forward, please. So what Huizinga's work really highlights is the idea that communities with high play potential create these magical circles where people momentarily can step out of their ordinary lives into play. And again, a lot of the work that we're going to talk about today and the tactics enable this opportunity for folks. Next slide. So when it comes to social connectedness and it comes to addressing the crisis of social isolation and loneliness, many of you may be familiar with the Office of the U.S. Surgeon General, which, again, I mentioned in 2023, identified social isolation and loneliness as an epidemic in the United States. In the report in which they outlined that epidemic, they also offered 6 pillars to advance social connection. And the first number one solution that they identified in creating greater social connectedness is to strengthen social infrastructure in local communities. This is the work that our field does, and it's vital when it comes to addressing social isolation and loneliness. Next slide, please. So how do communities support play and how do they build that social infrastructure that facilitates and affords that type of play where residents and inhabitants of a community can come together and engage with one another and build those connections? Next slide. Well, I'm going to draw your attention to some work that I did with a colleague from Brock University, Aaron Sharp, where we wrote a chapter called Placemaking in the Playful City. And in it, we distinguish between 2 ways that people play in their community. So I've referenced playing in the city, but this idea refers to all different types of communities. So whether you're a rural community, a suburban community, a remote community, or even an urban community. So I will start referencing it as playing in the community. Playing in the community really focuses on organized and sanctioned efforts that are designed to invite people to act in playful ways in specific spaces of a community. And our field does this exceptionally well. In other words, we may program events, we may program different experiences for residents to engage in that puts them into contact with others. There's also, in contrast, the idea of playing with the city or playing with the community. And this alternatively focuses on inhabitant-led action that plays with the rules of the community, including how spaces are defined and bound. In other words, it puts the control in the hands of community members to appropriate space and to use that space in ways that engage others. Next slide, please. I mentioned I've been engaging in a dialogue with my colleague Paul Cobflesh. I wanted to also insert his idea when he became familiar with Aaron and my idea around playing with the city, playing in the city. He offered up a third alternative, and that is the idea of playing as a city or playing as a community. And this idea really occurs when community members engage in shared, spontaneous, and emotionally resonant interactions that generate a collective sense of belonging and purpose. Let's think about the Winnipeg Jets victory the other day, how it brought people together. These types of experiences transcend structured and subversive play, emerging as a form of civic engagement where people create, adapt, and transform their community life together in ways that foster social cohesion and joy. So we also want to find those experiences where people come together and form that sort of civic community. Next slide. So this brings us to the idea of, okay, if play is important, if a playful city or a playful community is important, and it is a solution to bring people together, to make those important connections, to address social isolation and loneliness, what sort of tactics can we use to support a playful community? And that brings us next to the work that Christa is going to present.
Thanks, Troy. While Moji flips to the next slide, I'd just like to acknowledge that I think we should talk about the bringing together of people in Toronto around the Toronto Maple Leaf win. I just want to put that out there. So, because I know all of you on the call are big Leaf fans, and shout out to Edmonton. Anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about Activate Your Neighborhood. This is a resource that Troy and I and another colleague worked on in response to an initiative called A Common Vision, which is Canada's physical activity strategy. Next slide, please. The purpose of Activate Your Neighborhood is really a tactical guide. Next slide, Moji. Sorry, thanks. With a goal of increasing physical activity and social connectedness. Sorry, back one, the one that you were just on. That's it. So we want to increase physical activity, and social connectedness by neighbors rethinking, repurposing, and expanding their imaginations about their neighborhoods. Now, this project started with, as I mentioned, as a response to the Common Vision of Physical Activity Strategy. And what we were going to do is we were going to look really broadly at community. So what are some of the policies that that communities had that either facilitated physical activity or perhaps put barriers for people to be more active? But then COVID-19 came along and people weren't leaving their neighborhoods. They were actually staying in that space. And so we thought, all right, a year into the project, let's change our thinking and let's instead focus on neighborhoods. And so that's where this project came from. Next slide, please. So the purpose, there were we wanted to build a resource for three reasons. One, we wanted to increase the knowledge and build skills of neighbors themselves to recognize opportunities and assets that exist within their neighborhood to be more active. Things that, again, it could just be walking up and down, making use of curbs, going to a park where there might be logs that you can walk up and down on, or a playground. So a lot of those things exist if you use your imagination. We wanted to identify strategies that neighbors can use to plan and implement neighborhood placemaking. And then we really wanted to have people think about the neighborhoods in which they lived. So we're going to talk about all of that. Next slide, please. Just in case you're not familiar with the term placemaking, what are we talking about specifically? Well, tactical placemaking, and the term you might know is tactical urbanism. But because, again, as Troy mentioned, we are looking not just at urban settings, but also rural and remote. So we call it tactical placemaking, which refers to a low-cost, deliberate grassroots initiative to temporarily alter the built environment to improve local neighborhoods and public gathering places. So what might start off as a temporary alteration to bring attention to something that the neighborhood wants to see, it can sometimes lead to permanent changes, which can be great. And on the other hand, we might just need some of these things in place temporarily. It's really about the process of shaping public space to strengthen connections between people and places. And I think the cool thing about tactical placemaking is that this doesn't have to be led by leaders in our communities. All of you on the call today are leaders, but you're also live in neighborhoods. So put on your neighborhood hat as well and think about the placemaking that you can do. I just want to tell you a little bit about this picture. I actually took this in Reykjavik. And they have paintings all over their streets. And in this one in particular, my husband and I were standing, obviously where I was taking the picture. And I don't think there wasn't one person that I don't think walked over to this, stood on the starting line, and then either walked or ran down those lanes. So it was really cool, just this prompt that could get people to move a little bit more. Next slide. So again, I just want to walk you through the tactical guide, and if you can look at activateyourneighbourhoods.ca to walk through to see this live as well. So what we did is when we put the resource together, we wanted people, as I just mentioned, to think about the kinds of neighborhoods that you live in. So we don't live, as I said, all in cities. We do live in rural areas and remote areas. We had an opportunity to do some focus groups in Nova Scotia and also a pilot project. And we looked at some of the opportunities in rural areas. And so some of the ideas that are here have stemmed from those focus groups and also, I guess, passed the test in some respects to what can work in a rural environment as well. We don't all live in single dwelling homes. Many of us live in apartment buildings. Maybe we live in a senior's residence. So there's lots of different places and lots of ways in which we live in our neighborhood. So we have to think beyond just those who live in houses. So we've tried to do that in giving some examples. We want to make sure that we're addressing equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility. We want to be age friendly. So again, that some of our activities and some of the ways in which we engage with our neighbors can be both for young kids and also for older adults. And then, as you know, we live in Canada where we have 4 seasons and some all in one day. So um, we wanted to make sure again that we gave some ideas that took these into consideration, but also had people thinking about the picture might be, been taken in the summer, but in fact, we could change this to be doing something in the winter as well. Next slide. So again, these are the lenses that we were trying to look through and when people are thinking about how they're going to engage their neighborhood and how they're going to think about their neighborhood. So then we have tactics. There are 7 of them, and I'm going to quickly walk you through each of the 7. But you'll see again. I just wanted to show you this is a screenshot from the website, obviously that outlines all of them. These are words that actually came from Troy's work, and that there are words that are verbified. So they may be a little unusual, but we'll talk about what they mean in a second. Next slide, Moji. Thanks. The other thing that we wanted to put into the tactical guide is this, give people a sense of, again, how to use the guide. So there are 3 ways that people can consider working in their neighborhoods. And that's the one on the top, and we will get to yard bombing, but the one on the top, you'll see 3 little icons. The first one indicates, the one in the green indicates that this is something that you could just walk out your front door or down your stairs in your apartment building and do something yourself to become more active and potentially meet a few neighbors. The blue icon indicates it's something that you might do for your neighbors. You might put some big games out on your front yard so that everybody can enjoy them. And then the third one, the orange one, indicates activities that you can do as a group. You can come together as a neighborhood and plan some of these activities. So for each of the activities that is in the guide, they will have 1, 2, or all 3 of these icons. So you'll know sort of what works in different neighborhoods. The icon on the bottom, as a result of our Nova Scotia project, the focus there was really on physical activity and how the recreation folks and their municipal physical activity leaders could help facilitate physical activity. So what we did is we made sure for every single activity, if it was already active, it'll have a running shoe beside it with the other 3 icons. If it wasn't, we added a running shoe, and then we gave people ideas as to how to make the activity more physically active. So those are throughout as well, again, to help people identify the ways in which to use the activities. Next slide. The next few slides, I just want to walk you through some of the tactics so that you get a sense of it. There's over 100 ideas in there. So these are just sort of, again, just gives you a sense of what we've put into the guide. So the first tactic is called naturalize, which is beautifying neighborhood spaces with plants, flowers, and grasses to make them more appealing to spend time or engage in moderate physical activity. Next slide, please. And some of the ideas here, and I would honestly say some of them are well known to you. We didn't, in many cases, come up with anything really, really different, but they serve again as prompts to what you might do. You might have not, you might know about some of these, but never really thought about it. So community gardens being one. So maybe it helps somebody look at this and say, yeah, you know what, I could actually do that, or I could find out about one that might already exist in my neighborhood. I love guerrilla gardening, so it's finding a space that's not very attractive in your neighborhood, on your street, in a park, around, in this case, a tree, or it could be a lamppost, and planting something, um, essentially without permission, but to make the space more beautiful. I love yard sharing. I grew up in an apartment building in Toronto. We didn't have a yard, but it would have been really cool to be able to use somebody else's yard, to grow vegetables or whatever the case may be. So I think that's a fun one. And I also love Parking Day, which is an actual event. It's an international event that happens every September 26th, where you can go. You can put money in a parking meter, and then you take over that parking space and bring people down. And there's a for the Activate tactic, there's also one where you can do little fitness classes or yoga in these spots. Now, some of you might be going, yeah, that sounds safe. But like I said, this is an actual event, and in that case, what they do is they pick a space downtown, and everybody has the spots rented. So we did hear also some folks say, well, maybe the downtown businesses don't want you to take up their parking spaces. But in fact, in some of the focus groups that we did in Nova Scotia, some of the thoughts that we got was, actually, if you work with the business leaders, they may help promote this or sponsor this as a way to bring people down into the downtown core. And that while they're enjoying their time, they might also come and have a coffee at our coffee shop or whatever. So it serves a lot of different purposes. Next slide, please. So oh, sorry. Yeah, next slide. At the end of each of these different tactics, there's also some quick tips and ideas. So for every one of the 7 tactics, there are these pictures that you're seeing with the description and the icons that I talked about. But there are also these quick tips and ideas where you just might need to see the sentence or a couple of words, and it gives you another idea. And I would also like to say that if you have, and we're going to talk about this at the end with Gord, but if there are things that you're doing in your community that you'd like to share with us, I would love to add them to the site. So please feel free to put them in the chat or send them to me directly. My email will be up at the end. So next slide is Activate, and that's about using visual displays of physical activity, such as sport demonstrations or the availability of equipment to encourage spectators and participants. So in this case, you'll see again somebody that's gone to a park and is using it for their own physical activity and using the swings and equipment to do something different as part of their walk. The skating rink is in somebody's front yard as opposed to the backyard. And so again, encouraging neighbors to come over and use that. A sport lending library as opposed to a little library, putting big lawn games on your front yard. Again, some may be saying, well, we actually have bylaws in our community. We do have a section in the guide that talks about bylaws. But I would say that we also took a little bit of an ask forgiveness, not permission approach to this. So I always get nervous when I when I say this. But I've done a couple of presentations where we've had city councilors and who have said, you know what, this is we need this push. We need citizens. We need our local citizens to implement some of these and to come forward, because it makes it easier for us to then go to council and pass some of these bylaws or change some of the bylaws. So I think that's our message around some of these. Next slide. And again, there's tons of different ideas. These are I just pulled a few out to walk you through the guide. The third area is called Culinise, and that's next slide. Thanks, Moji. Incorporating food, particularly its preparation, distribution, and consumption into neighborhood spaces. So again, these are things that you've probably obviously have either done or know about: street barbecues, picnics that you would organize. Driveway lunches, my house, except it was called rum and eggnog, but for the purposes of our family resource, we called it driveway lunch. It was Christmas during COVID when people couldn't come in but wanted to be together. The lemonade stand, again, something pretty ordinary that you would see quite a bit. Within the guide, though, every single activity has a bunch of different links. And in this case, it links you to an organization that talks about how you can use this not only for, in this case, social connection, but and fun, but helping young kids to be entrepreneurial. So there's lots of additional great ideas in the guide. And I loved the mobile produce market. In this case, it looks like a very elaborate van or bus, but in fact, we've also seen some, and I think there's an example in the guide of somebody pulling their local produce along in a wagon. So it doesn't have to be this big, huge thing. You can shape this in whatever way you want it to be. Falling Fruit Map is the map of where people can come along, walk along the street and pick some of their own apples. And then I love the Republic of Neighbors, which is people bring their own tables and they just set it up in a nice long line and everybody eats together. So again, that's just some examples in that one. The fourth tactic is a mouthful. So it's we combine two actually. So it's spectacleize, festivalize, and eventify. And that's using featured entertainment to attract people to neighborhood spaces and organizing public gatherings to bring a festive atmosphere to neighborhood spaces. So again, things that you've probably may have seen. Block parties are quite common here in Burlington where I live. There are actual grants that you can receive and people can, they'll help you cut off the street so that you can have your own block party. But I love the pop-up cinema idea. Porch festivals, there's all kinds of talented people in your neighborhoods who would probably enjoy performing and that kind of thing. So that's the notion behind that one. The next slide is, or tactic is aestheticize. So that's using art in a variety of forms to beautify neighborhood spaces and encourage greater activity. Yard bombing seems to be a real popular one, and I always get excited when I actually see these things in real life. And I have seen yarn bombing actually in Kensington Market in downtown Toronto. There's a bunch of trees that have been yarn bombed. And it's beautiful and lively and brings people together. It's artwork out on the street. And of course, things like painting garbage cans. And this art fence is in Squamish, BC. Ferry trails are in a few communities. I think this one is from is on reserve. I can't remember exactly. I'll think about it. But so there's lots of different ideas. Again, chalk we've seen before. And then trail mix is there's a QR code and you put your phone to it and you can listen to music while you're walking. I don't remember where that one is, but we do have that in Burlington as well, associated with our Sound of Music Festival, which is not the Sound of Music, the best movie ever in the world, but an open air music festival that we have here. Tactic number 6 is called convivialize. And I think this one really is the sort of epitome of the social connectedness piece of all of this, which is really about bringing neighbors together and putting, next slide, Moji, please, giving them a cue to gather and sit and socialize together. So in this case, chair bombing. So we had yarn bombing. Now we have chair bombing where you bring your own chairs and you can set up a space to be together. Putting your fire pit in the front yard, setting up, this is just again, out in a laneway where people have set up picnic tables and umbrellas, and hopefully it could stay for a long time. Maybe it's just for a short time. This prompt board, again, I'm not sure where we got the picture, but I actually did see this in Charlottetown, PEI. So a little bit of people before I die writing what they want to do. So gives people an opportunity to, to see something, but to socialize with people when they're actually using the prompt board. And then the final one is whimsicalize and gamify. So adding imaginative and sometimes quirky features or illustrations to signify to people gameplay and encourage activity in neighborhood spaces. And again, these can be on little neighborhoods. This can be in a parking lot in an apartment building. So again, anywhere. This middle hopscotch, the professionally looking one, was also from Reykjavik, and same. I'm pretty sure it went down the span the whole street. And I'm pretty certain it was rare to see not anybody using this when they went by. I love the googly eyes on the lamppost. And then the swing in the bus stop is actually in Montreal. So these things actually exist. And again, obviously some of them take a little bit more effort to put together. And then some of them are very, very simple. Couple more from me. Next slide. Just wanted to introduce you. There is a section on the website that is called Tools. And what you'll see is a number of different, I guess, resources there for people. So how to go from ideation to creation. So if you've got a neighborhood that wants to do something really big, they might need a little bit of help sort of thinking about, okay, how do I start? So that how to go from ideation to creation gives them a bit of a a roadmap of how to go about putting an event together. Deconstruct and reconstruct. Again, this came from our conversations in Nova Scotia where people said, and it was around the parking day, where people said, yeah, we can't do that. We're not sure how that would work. And so what we said is, all right, let's break this down. What is the actual premise of this? What is it we're trying to accomplish? And then let's think about different ways to do this. So there's a couple of examples in there of how you could rethink some of the ideas to make them more to make them make maybe more sense in your own community. Talking to strangers, we've somehow gotten away from wanting to do that. So some tips there on how to talk to strangers. And then for all of you who are community leaders, giving you some suggestions about what your role might be to help support, how to help get this information to your neighbors and then help them support or help support their efforts in this case. And then we've got about 3 case studies as well that you can look at on the site. And then finally, there's a whole bunch of resources that you'll see. Next slide, Moji, on the site as well. And these are, as I mentioned, throughout the guide, there are tons of links that you can click on that give you more information about things. These resources tend to be a little bit bigger guides and so on. So the information, I think, I guess I'm a little partial to it, is fantastic. Take you a little while to get through it. We're trying to continuously update the information that's on there. And so, as I said, if there's anything that you'd like to contribute to this, we would love to have it. If you have pictures that we can put up, that'd be great too. So that's it for me. And I'm going to turn it over to Gord to show you some of the other examples.
Thank you, Krista, and thanks for everyone being here today. I'll introduce myself more fully in just a second, but first we wanted to get a bit of a sense of who's on the webinar with us today. So Moji has a poll available for us, and Moji, if you can just pull that up for everyone. And what it does is it lists different sectors that we expect are going to be showing up here on the webinar today. So what I'll ask you to do is to navigate that poll, click on the sector that most represents who you are with today. And as you're doing that, I'll just get into what my job is here today in this presentation, and then we'll come back to that poll in just a second as well. So what I'm here to do today is to connect the toolkit or the how that Krista just outlined for us to the philosophies of Activate Your Neighborhood or the why that Troy laid out for us at the beginning of this as well. So to connect those two things to the roles that many of us on the call take on in our daily work lives. From my perspective, I am an MPAL in the municipality of Chester on the south shore of Nova Scotia. About 11,000 people live in our municipality. MPAL stands for Municipal Physical Activity Leader. There's a couple of dozen or a few dozen of us in these positions in Nova Scotia. And it's actually a partnership between the province of Nova Scotia through Community Culture, Tourism and Heritage and the municipalities that take part in the program. And my job is to promote physical activity. So you've always, thanks, let's look at this right now actually. So we got about 50% of us just under in the recreation world, health about 16%, academia 7%, no one from sport. I was curious if there'd be any sport folks here today. Government, I'll presume, is provincial and municipal, and then others. I'm always curious who the others are. And so if we get a chance to revisit that, we will at the end of this as well. So just back to my perspective on this. So you've heard the adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So I always think of that as my job, is that my job is to lead people to the water, physical activity water, and show them where it is and how wonderful it is and that the temperature is just right and all the benefits of the getting there. But I always have to reconcile for myself that I can't ensure that people are going to drink the water once they're there. So I focus on policy and planning in my work, less so on the programming side of things. So what I'm always thinking about is how can I build things or construct or change systems to provide more opportunities for physical activity in our communities. And more specifically, I kind of think of my job in 3 different buckets. So the first one is to sometimes lead when I'm working with community members. And leading to me means to kind of see the execution of a project from vision all the way through to the end. So I think of that as kind of stepping in with our communities. I'm also here to support our communities. So to bring my experience, my knowledge, the contacts I might have, sometimes funding as well, to support the folks who want to do good work in our community. So I think of that as stepping with people. But kind of in between the lead and the support levels, a word that I like is catalyze. So I think of that as kind of sparking some good ideas in our communities, but not necessarily needing to take ownership through the whole process. So my question to you, and I'll ask you to put your responses in the chat a few times I ask you questions here. But my question to you is that if someone comes to you and asks you to initiate one of the projects that maybe Christa outlined in the toolkit, or perhaps you go to another partnering agency and say, hey, I've got this great idea. Would you like to take this on? My question is, what are some of the likely responses you might get from that agency you're looking for help from, or that you might give representing your agency as well? So feel free to throw some answers in the chat box. I will offer some questions, but answers to my own question though. So I think one thing you might hear is, yeah, great idea, but we got it. We'll do it from here. Another answer you might get is, no, we're not going to take that on, and you're not going to do it either. And maybe there's legitimate reasons for that. Maybe bylaws are getting in the way, whatever it might be, back to Chris's earlier point. Or you might also hear, maybe, we'll get back to you though. And sometimes you never hear back from whoever you're talking to. I see Mila offering, or maybe it's Mila's cat offering, funding is one of those things. So if you can't find the funding, you can't do the thing, right? And that's actually an important point that you bring up, Mila, because one of the things that we try to highlight in the toolkit is that some of these examples certainly cost some dollars for sure. But often they're low cost, no cost, or again, if you deconstruct some of those examples and think about the ways that you can make them low cost, no cost, they're a little bit more achievable that way sometimes soon too. So why I like the toolkit's approach is that I think what it's trying to do is overcome what I've observed as a social dynamic that persists. And that social dynamic, I think, can be illustrated, Moji, if you just jump ahead, by this next slide, which is from Dr. Seuss's book, Go the Places You'll Go. Would you jump ahead there? Thanks. And this is The Waiting Place. This is a book, a story that I read to my kids a lot as they were growing up. And this is the place for people who are just waiting. So I'll read this quickly. It's kind of fun to read. It's for folks who are just waiting for a train to go, or a bus to come, or a plane to go, or a mail to come, or the rain to go, or the phone to ring, or the snow to snow, or waiting around for a yes or no, or waiting for their hair to grow. Everyone is just waiting. Waiting for the fish to bite, or waiting for the wind to fly a kite, or waiting around for Friday night, or waiting for perhaps for their Uncle Jake, or a pot to boil, or a better break, or a string of pearls, or a pair of pants, or a wig with curls, or another chance. Everyone is just waiting. And so, as I said, the toolkit encourages us to break out of the waiting place. And I think what I've observed, at least, and I realize this is just my perspective, that especially because I work in government, that sometimes we've kind of created this learned dependence on us where people expect us to take the lead on many of the things that you might see in the toolkit. And sometimes because we have that service-centered paradigm, kind of stymies creativity, citizen engagement, and fun in many cases as well. So again, I think the toolkit exemplifies, what we are called to do as leaders in our communities, whether it's in government or organizations, or even if you're a neighbor as well, how we can shape our neighborhoods together. So another question I have for you is, what do neighbors need to take on some of these projects that you might see in the toolkit? So again, I'll just pause for a second. If you have a thought, what do neighbors need to initiate these projects or take them on, lead them? Give me some thoughts in the chat box there. While you're thinking of that and while you're typing, I'll offer a few thoughts of my own. I think one would be inspiration. And again, that's what the toolkit is trying to provide, that inspiration. Kelly, I see you say encouragement. absolutely. And encouragement, also in the form of support, which you've talked about a little bit as well. Someone, I was just going to say permission, Julia. So someone to do it with them and permission to do it. Sometimes permission just means to give you permission, but also to get out of the way, or to say, yeah, that bylaw actually isn't so prohibitive as you might think. You actually have more permission to do things than you thought you had. No low red tape from local government. Yep, that comes down to permission as well sometimes. Funding shows up. Something that came up in the last webinar that we did, it was framed as consistent or persistent support, not just one and done. I agreed with that. And then I equated that to that if you can build that relationship on an ongoing basis, what you also start to build is trust. So I would throw trust into one of these things that are required for neighbors to be able to take on this stuff. Appropriate spaces as well. And appropriate can mean different things. So sometimes you have to fit the project into what's appropriate, or the space to the project as well. So thank you for those offerings. So again, what we're trying to do with this toolkit is that we want to get us as leaders beyond that no but or maybes or yes, you won't do it, to kind of the old improv rule, which is yes and. So receiving the ideas, building on them, and then doing what it requires next, and sometimes that's permission or whatever it might be, to then allow the neighbors to take control of their neighborhoods as well and build some of these wonderful things. To link it all back to Troy's thesis, which is that a playful community is imperative for our social connection and our health as well, and our happiness. So just what I want to do now is I want to practice a little bit about how do you build these things. So what we've got, if you want to jump ahead, Moji, to the next screen. What we've got here is 3 examples that we've borrowed from the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center in Halifax. The 3 of us actually did a presentation there back in late February. So we appreciate these examples because they really nicely illustrate what can be done in our communities. And each of these 3 examples are kind of before and afters. So my challenge to you is, when I show you these before photos, again, what I want you to do is put your thoughts in the chat boxes and I'll monitor that. But my question to you with this first one on Gottingen Street is, what would you suggest we could do to create social connection in this space and to promote physical activity? So I'm going to pause for just a couple of seconds while you start to throw in your ideas. Social connection and physical activity opportunities. So I see chalk boxes, hopscotch. Thank you, Marla. Anyone else? Benches and planters. More benches. A few more thoughts. Benches, flowers. So a lot of places to pause. That certainly speaks to social connection. Lighting and add some greenery and shade. Moji, if you jump ahead, picture frame, thanks. Moji, if you just jump ahead. So here's what they actually did in this space. This was from June 2022 with their Festival of Everyone festival. And what they did is, obviously in the foreground there, you see the chessboard that was set up. So live chess with real people moving big pieces around. In the background of this photo, there's more street games, yard games, they called them. There's obviously some art pieces or some colorful elements that have been added above the street as well. Moji, if you go to the next photo, you'll see drumming circles and jingle dress dances as well happening, and they've greened the space actually a little bit, which had probably had a functional element to it, but also just brought a little bit more color into that space. And I'll just point out the people in the background there, particularly too in kind of the neon green shirts. Those were actually Everyone Every Day coordinators. Everyone Every Day is a program of the Friendship Center, and it's their job to not do these things necessarily for community or to their community, but to be out there in community and generate and harvest these great ideas as well, and then work hand in hand with those community members to then execute some of these things. So it wasn't for Everyone Every Way staff to go and do this. It was to build the idea and then execute the idea together with their community members. 2 more examples. You go to the next one, Moji, please. And I'm gonna ask you, when you see this one, start throwing your thoughts into the chat box. So when you look at this, all right, an alert going off in our office here. When you see this space, give me some thoughts on what you could do in this space. So this is a park space in the George Dixon Center Park. Musical instruments on the building. I think Andrew might have referenced the last photo. Give me some thoughts, folks. Benches, flower carts, add colored greenery on the front fence, raised garden boxes, swings, seating. So a little bit of everything. Music festival, jump ahead emoji if you would. So a little bit of all of those ideas showed up in this space. Shovels in the dirt, loose parts. Love loose parts. Rock art, little free equipment library, mud kitchen, loose parts. So in this case, what was built out here was a bulletin board, the arbor over top, seating, which showed up in your suggestions as well. And the interesting thing about this one too is that even though the Friendship Center, again, initiated the conversation, the design actually came from the community. And then when it came time to build these pieces, and yes, going back to funding comments before, this one costs a little bit more than just a free thing that you insert somewhere. But the interesting element of this piece is that they actually have a community build trailer. And the purpose of that trailer is to be out in community, again, harvesting those ideas, but then providing the tools and the know-how and working hand in hand together, as I said before, to then execute the vision that comes from the community. Next one, and last one, Moji, just jumping ahead. And the reason why I throw this one in as an example is that I find myself, at least, this one just particularly from the perspective that's given here, to be a little bit of a challenge to think about how could you actually do something, in the spirit of the toolkit to change the face of this space entirely. Again, this is a Friendship Center example. This is Brunswick Street. So on the left of this image, you can see a driveway or a ramp coming down towards their building, a pretty gray rock wall, and then some new apartment buildings that are being built above them there. So throw some ideas at me. We'll just take a couple of seconds to harvest those ideas, and then I'll show you the after in this one as well. Plants. A balance beam on the rock wall. That's a new thought. Thanks, Kim. Flowers, buses, murals. That might have been bushes. Plant vines on the wall to green it, naturalize it, to use the language of the toolkit. Gardens, food garden on the rock wall, mural on the pavement. Each section of the rock wall can be painted as a mural. If you jump ahead, storyboards, thank you. If you jump ahead, Moji, this is again the after. So a little bit different perspective. So I've tricked you a little bit, I realize. But what I wanted to highlight here is that that rock wall that you see kind of in the middle of the photo has been transformed now. So with new plantings, bushes, green spaces as well. On the backside, on that wall that you couldn't see in the previous photo, I realize is now a mural that incorporates powwow characters, or powwow dancers, I should say. Seating is incorporated there. Just to the left of the photo, there's actually an 8-pointed star planter as well. And the plants there, I think, all have medicinal uses as well. So it's a medicinal garden too. So those are 3 just quick examples of how the Mi'kmaq Friendship Center has done some really fantastic work, and full credit to them, and thanks for allowing us to borrow those. But the reason I wanted to use those examples because they were really good examples of, again, the before and the after, using some of the ideas and thoughts that we try to encapsulate in the toolkit. I should be very clear though, they didn't necessarily use the toolkit and pull all those ideas. This is, again, another example of how communities are doing fantastic work using the concepts of the toolkit. So with that, I'm going to throw it back to Christa, and I think we've got a little bit of time left for some questions and answers.
Yeah, thank you, Gord. That was awesome. I love this slide, which is we have questions, but don't anybody ask any. But I'm kidding. So maybe yeah, all 3 of us will come back on, and I'm seeing Gord really big. I hope everybody can see Troy and myself as well. It's great. So some questions have already been put into the Q&A. If you have some other ones, please feel free to add them in, and I'll try and get to all of them. And I think the 3 of us will just try to take them all. So the first question was around any suggestions on how to protect your project from being vandalized. And I think that one actually came up a couple of times, which is a great which is a great question and very practical. So I don't know, Gord or Troy, if you had any suggestions, or Gord, is that something that you've had to deal with?
We deal with it. I don't let that fear stop me from trying to do good stuff. It's a reality, absolutely. And I don't know if this is the right term, but I consider myself a humanist. So I trust that people are good until proven otherwise. And what I think that I've noticed over the years is that, especially, and this is where the toolkit kit comes back in, especially if you engage people in the process and builds a sense of stewardship and ownership and pride, the chances of vandalism are never zero, but they decrease greatly. So with that in mind, I never worry about vandalism. And I might be naive, I realize, but I like the theory of failing small too. So that means that if I do have concerns about vandalism, or maybe I live in a place that maybe does have a higher likelihood of that, I'll fail small, meaning that I'll start small. I won't spend a lot of money. I'll do those little projects, the easy, the free projects, and the consequence of vandalism are much lower. I think those vandalism, especially if you're persistent and you don't give up and you do the next small free thing and the next small free thing, the vandals get tired. They take the handles, Bob Dylan said. And so you move on and you just do good stuff. That's my philosophy, right or wrong.
I agree with it. I think it all makes a lot of sense. That was great. Troy, I'll just give you a chance if you wanted to add anything or okay. Awesome. Thank you, Gord. Thank you for that great question too. Another question was around any grants that might be available that could help fund a project. I know I would just say, like I said, I mentioned before, I live in the city of Burlington in Ontario, just outside of Toronto, and our Parks and Recreation Department offers, I think, $500 grants that anybody can apply for, and it helps provide money for equipment, food. I think it's got quite a variety of what you can use. I think a lot of the grants are quite local in nature in terms of for your community. To be honest, I'm not sure. I'm certain that there's probably some provincial and federal grants that you can get. The federal ones, I think we're gonna have to wait on. There's just been obviously a new government, so we're waiting to hear what grants might be available, which we should know hopefully June, July, August. But I think probably what you'll find is what happens closer within your own communities. Troy, I don't.
Or a point that Krista underscored earlier, and that is that a lot of these activities and tactics are actually meant to be very low cost and in some respects free. So I think communities can engage in this type of activity without it necessarily being very costly to the municipality or to themselves. And I think some of the more creative activities actually tend to be the least costly. So that doesn't directly answer that question, but it should, I guess my point being that the lack of any grant money should not preclude folks from engaging in this type of work.
Yep. No, that's a great answer. And it is true. We did make sure that, again, obviously there's a whole variety of different things that you can do, as Troy just said, but some of them are walk out your door and explore and find what you can do, or things that you might already have in your house that you can do. There's a great initiative around couches. I'm forgetting the name right now. Again, they're doing it here in Burlington where you take out an old couch. I just actually got rid of some old outdoor furniture, which I kept saying to my husband, just keep it. We'll put it out on the front yard and people can come and sit on it. And he's like, they're not coming to sit on it. I go, no, but they will. So, so again, free of charge. But yeah, check locally for sure. Another question was
But
around,
Krista, I'll
yeah.
just jump in really quick and just point out Lauren suggested reaching out to local businesses or
Oh,
business
sorry, I meant to
associations
mention that. Yeah.
members. Yeah. Great idea. I just add to that, yes, and echo recreation departments also have these small grants available for different projects, or those grants might come up through economic development departments in your municipality, beautification grants. So it's a bit of a fitting the project into those things, but it can be legit. There's service groups in our communities as well. I happen to live in a community that has a trust, so small grants like that. So I'm just throwing out ideas of places to kind of mine in your communities. Another little one might be a health board too. That's our system in Nova Scotia too. So just think creatively and kind of scour the entire landscape of what might be out there, but it doesn't need to necessarily be an expensive proposal.
Yeah, awesome. Jessica, I see your hand up. I'll get to you in 1 second. Another question was around older adults, many of whom live alone. And it's hard to get them to come out and engage in events. And are there any suggestions on how to get them interested and involved? I think this question came up at the last webinar also, and I think, Gord, you spoke to that. Before you answer that, I did want to mention the Active Living Alliance for Canadians with a Disability, which is the organization I'm with now, is working with Active Aging Canada. We just received a grant, and we are putting together some suggestions specifically, and they will be added to the tactical guide, not for several months, but to talk specifically about how to engage older adults and what ways that we like what activities for people with disabilities would be good additions to the tactical guide. So just keep an eye out for that as well. Troy's going to be helping us with that initiative as well. But sorry, Gord, did you want to take that question?
Yeah, I can offer something. So it did come up in the last session, and I'll answer similarly. But my answer at that time was I'd used the toolkit to host a session around community engagement and what's happening in their community. And it's kind of a retrospective, but then we tried to apply it to future projects we could do. I think I learned two things from that, though, is that seniors particularly, and that was a seniors group, want to be engaged in this kind of talk. So I think what you could do in any community across the country is host a session purely around the toolkit. Just using it as inspiration. I noticed I was in New Minas last weekend in the Annapolis Valley here, and what New Minas had done, which I didn't realize, had actually put stickers with the QR code for the toolkit on walkways where seniors are likely to gather. So it's, again, just getting the ideas out to them. My other lesson, which I've learned over the years, I think, is that seniors want to make a contribution still. That's something that they maybe have lost, and because they're probably no longer working, maybe their family lives a little bit further away, but they still want to be engaged. They want to make a contribution to their community. And I think that the toolkit is an inroad or a hook to encourage people to contribute to their community. So when you kind of layer the activities of the toolkit and with that sense of contribution, that could be a way to go. And then I noticed Shona offers intergenerational skills workshops as well, which is a fantastic suggestion. So bringing, maybe it's through a school service club or something like that, where you can bring those two different kind of groups together as well, the youth and seniors, towards a common cause.
Awesome, thanks. Jessica didn't have a question. She probably has a cat too that also stepped on the keyboard and raised its hand. A question about having facilitated sessions with community members using the toolkit to inspire and encourage. I'll start on that one, and I don't know, Troy, if you had anything. One of the things that we had wanted to do in our pilot in Nova Scotia was to engage community members. Unfortunately, we didn't have great success bringing community members together. We did, however, in our focus groups do that. So Gord and I visited, I'm forgetting now, Gord, 2 or 3 different communities, rural communities in Nova Scotia, where we talked about the tactical guide. So we have 2 names, toolkit, tactical guide, same thing. And again, we got not only great suggestions, which we've incorporated into the tactical guide, but I think a lot of enthusiasm. Like, what I really notice is it's one thing for us to send this out and hope that people promote it and talk about it. But every time we've done a presentation with folks like yourselves, there's just such an enthusiasm for this. So I think it's really important. We really want to get to folks who live in the communities. Again, you all have an important role to play, but we think that these ideas are, again, fun and reasonably easy to implement. So I think that's a really important part of this. Sadly for us, the grant is over. So we're just trying to determine what our next steps are with continuing this work. with the tactical guide. So you might have to be our feet on the ground in the short term, getting the message out to your folks. But we're still trying to think about how we can continue the work on this tactical guide, and getting to people who live in neighborhoods is one of the key priorities. Troy, I don't know if you wanted to add anything or no. Okay, Gord. Has liability come up when pitching these projects to municipalities? Yes. So we have had the question about liability, and I think in some cases, we've talked about liability in the sport, physical activity, recreation sector for so long, and the fact that that's one of our biggest barriers to actually helping kids be active. We hear about it in schools, we hear about it at facilities. I think we do address it in the tactical guide a little bit, but it's, of course, a lot of the grants that you have, there is probably some of them do have something in there where you have to have insurance. But I would say, although it has come up, I don't know, and again, Troy and Gord, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that it's been a huge issue. I think people recognize that physical activity inherently carries a risk, trying to get people more active. And so, we haven't had any, in talking to the neighbors specifically, we didn't have anybody raise the issue of liability in how they hope to use the tactical guide when we were in Nova Scotia. So, people have mentioned it, but it wasn't sort of an overwhelming concern, again, as I recall. Gord, does that, and again, you work at the municipal level, so you probably have more experience.
Yeah, I mean, that rings true, what you just conveyed there. I think that it goes back to working where you can too, right? And where liability lands. So if the project that you wanted to take on was kind of a front yard project, so the skating rink comes to mind that you showed, Christa, that's on your property. Unless you put a bear trap in the middle of that skating rink, or you're grossly negligent in some way, you're probably okay. But, and I am not a insurance expert, don't quote me on any of this. But I think what you can do is that, again, work with partners. So if you came into the municipality of Chester and wanted to initiate one of these projects, I'm going to do risk management thinking, absolutely. But what I'm also going to do is find a way, hopefully, to make that thing work. And sometimes that means working, partnering with the municipality in this case, because as long as we're doing things right, then it falls under our liability coverage. So there's ways around this. There's other partners you can work with as well. Again, it comes down to not being grossly negligent, and I wouldn't worry about these things too much.
Mm-hmm.
I do think the bear trap might solve the vandalism problem that was mentioned.
Your words, not mine, Troy.
We are recording this. You remember that, right? Is there we've got 3 minutes left. I'm just going to try and get through these last two questions. Is there a process in place for harvesting some of the great Activate Your Neighborhood projects across Canada, somewhere we can share as communities do activities? Well, I would say right now, you would call me or email me, and I'm happy for you to do that. As I mentioned, one of the things that we're trying to do is continue to collect these stories as we go. So until we have an exact spot where the project's going to land, the website is up and running. We don't have a place on the website to collect the stories, but we probably could do that. We could probably just put a spot where you can enter your own stories. We find sometimes it's hard to collect stories, and so we didn't go ahead and offer that as an option. But I do think that at this point, if you're comfortable to do it, that I would just send me a direct email, and I'd be happy to put it up there. And then once we have a better sense of what's happening, I'd love to come back to all of you and let you know, give you an update on what's happening with the project. Troy and I are actually working on something right now, so I'm hoping that we'll be back in the next couple of months. And Lauren, yes, we have our contact information, which will go up on the screen in 1 second. Thank you for that. And then the last was, do you offer presentations to communities? I would love to. I would love to do this full time. I'm going to say that in the 34 years that I've worked in physical activity, sport, and recreation, this is one of the most fun, rewarding projects that I've done. And we haven't even spent all the time in communities as we would have liked to. So this was going to be my retirement project. But anyway, that's a whole other story. But so we would love to do that. We don't right now, but we could. I'm going to speak on behalf of Troy and Gord and say that if there was interest, in having a presentation. If you wanted to host something, I think we'd be excited to come and present and talk more about Activate Your Neighborhood. So I think Troy is free. You'll have to let us think
Always.
about that. I think that's right. Because Kelly was asking what we charge. Oh, I don't even know, boy. We'll have to think about that. But
I'll just, Chris,
I
I'll
think
just throw in,
probably nothing, but we'll chat. Thank you for
well,
putting that up. Sorry, Gord, go ahead.
if it's a Kelly Cunningham, I think I know, free of charge for that Kelly, yes. I would just say reach out to Krista as well, and maybe there's an element of opportunism here. So Krista and Troy, more so than me, are often traversing the country, and maybe if there's a chance to overlap a trip or extend
Wow.
for, I'm speaking on your behalf now, but yeah, I think
Totally.
it's wonderful
Do
when
it.
I think it'd be wonderful if we could replicate even the session we did at the Friendship Center, which was so great and rewarding. So be
Yeah.
in touch with Krista is my advice.
Yeah. No, I'm happy for you to get in touch with me, and we would love to. Yes, I would love to come to the Yukon. Can I come in the summer? I've been there twice in the winter, so um, but thank you for that. And yeah, as Gord mentioned, we are often doing some other work, and if I can combine something, and if all of us can, actually all three of us are going to be in Saskatoon, June 10th to 13th, if anybody's from Saskatoon. But anyway, all that is to say, yeah, please get in touch. Like I said, this has been one of my favorite projects. I think it has such potential. I think the whole area of placemaking is really growing. Troy again has been working in this space for quite a long time. And I think is probably really excited about the fact that some of the work that he had done from a theoretical point of view around these tactics has been taken and put into a practical tool. So anyway, with that, I just wanted to thank all of you. I do want to thank Moji. She was really trying her best to do those slides. She said that there was a bit of a delay on the slides, but I want you to know that she did a great job, and thank her for her technical skills as always. My thanks to Gord, my thanks to Troy. It's been wonderful working with you guys. And I hope that we'll be in touch with many of you. So please feel free to reach out. And with that, I'll bring us to a close. Thank you. Have an amazing day. And yeah, I'm going to say it. Go Leafs, go. I had to. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.